Welcome to the Good Reading Podcast, proudly sponsored by Book People Gift Cards. A Book People gift card is the perfect gift for readers of all ages. Simply order your gift card online at bookpeoplegiftcards.org.au. Redeem at any one of over 500 bookshops across Australia. Visit bookpeoplegiftcards.org.au. Levi Pinfold is an artist and illustrator of many acclaimed books. He is the winner of the prestigious Kate Greenaway Medal for his distinctive children's illustration. He is the author and illustrator of The Django, The Greenling, and Black Dog. Today, I'm talking to Levi Pinfold about his contribution to the Harry Potter Wizarding Almanac, the official magical companion to J.K. Rowling's Harry Potter books. Levi Pinfold, welcome to the Good Reading Podcast.
Well, thanks very much for having me.
When you're invited to contribute to a Harry Potter almanac, what's your first thought, your very first reaction?
The very first reaction is usually, well, yes, okay, yeah, definitely, I'll do that. That sounds great. I'm a fan, and I've had the good fortune to work with this subject matter before as well. So I feel very excited and honoured to be invited back to do something, and I think it was a really exciting proposition. And the email that I got said, oh, we'd like you to do this very interesting new slant on it. And it's going to be an almanac or a kind of compendium of all the information about the wizarding world. And I thought that's a really interesting approach to it as well. I mean, I'm a big fan of those kind of books growing up. I had a Lord of the Rings one. I referred to it as I was reading Lord of the Rings. And I think doing something that's pictorial as well it's a great sort of companion volume to the fantasy series. It really helps you immerse yourself in the world, So doing something where I could contribute to that kind of thing was hugely exciting. So yeah, bouncing up and down in the seat, going, yeah, of course, yeah, ready to go. When can I start?
And how does your vision for the illustrations develop? Is it on paper, in your mind, within the world of Harry Potter, or is it somewhere in the wider world?
Good. There's so much, amazing, and every year there seems to be more amazing stuff, new iterations of the characters and new sort of readings of the whole wizarding world. I think that's what's so fascinating about it. It just keeps growing. But this particular scenario, we were sort of working together as a team. So I worked very, very closely with the designers and editors, and they got a brief over to me with loads of information, loads of amazing information on each spread, and the designer helped mock up a few designs that we could potentially go with. So in this instance, this isn't always the case. I had a very, very prescribed layout to go off with some very interesting inspirations behind it. So for instance, the sorting hat spread was based upon those old charts you used to get of the zodiac. We were looking a bit at those kind of influences and seeing if we could shoehorn it into the four houses, we were working together quite a bit. So my task was to embellish. Basically, I got my medieval monk hat on and did what I could in the margins. Sort of got a bit carried away in the margins sometimes. It was a really sort of different approach to what I usually do with illustration. Interesting on this one, because I haven't really approached illustrations like that in a very long time. You do have to kind of sink yourself into the world, and it does become more real than your real life sometimes. In the middle of the night, all you're thinking about is the magical world. So you have to take it very seriously, because you want to get all the details very, very correct, and you want to make it as good as it possibly can be, and you want to make it seem like it came from that world. So your creative journey as an artist, to use that term again, immerse yourself in that world. I think it really is about listening to the audiobooks, reading the books, trying to envisage it as a very real thing, which I think isn't really hard because it's so well written, and so really the journey is to try and step outside yourself and see what you feel like the book is trying to tell you. So it's an interesting way, because you're not just responding to, I feel like doing this today. What do other people think this is going to look like? What do I think this is going to look like? And what influences do I think this probably came from? What do I think this is inspired by? So you're looking back at historical references, and those are all really sort of interesting ways to sort of get your head in the right space. Because sometimes you don't feel like drawing wizards. Sometimes, I mean, it does happen when you do it all the time. I feel like sometimes you feel like, oh, I just want to do a portrait of someone that I really love, But if you can sort of sink into it in that way, it comes a bit easier. That's kind of the journey that I personally went on.
That immersive approach is beautifully illustrated in the magnificent 4-page gatefold of The Forbidden Forest. That wide aspect really engulfs you, draws you into the forest. Where did you look for that inspiration for those pages?
That was a really wonderful thing to work on. That was one of the things I was so excited about, because I very rarely get to work in that format. And it's a very wide format. A widescreen is as wide as we get, really. I think even if you look at art history in the Western world, you're sort of limited to French standard sizing in a lot of senses. So it's more like approaching a kind of, when you look at those ancient Chinese scrolls, it's kind of a bit like that. And your eye wanders over them in a different way. So what was so interesting about this is there wasn't necessarily a focal point. There was a whole bunch of different focal points on it. All of the information that I had to include came from the text. So we had about 8 or 9 things that definitely needed to go in there. All of those magical beings, Firenze, and all of the magical beings that live in the Forbidden Forest. So we had that to go from. And then, of course, we wanted to base the forest on the forests up in sort of Scottish Highlands sort of area, which is where sort of Hogwarts is supposed to sort of be. So we took a lot of research from the forests there, and I spent a few days looking at photos and trying to get as much material as I could from that, and trying to let that sort of sink into my subconscious so it all came out when I was doing the drawing. The rest of that was just trying to create this big forest that looked like a forest, and you could walk into the forest with your eyes and explore the forest as you would a real forest. So it sort of felt like I was going for a walk. I wanted it to feel like that. And it felt like when I was doing it, I was going for a walk, and I wasn't necessarily hung up on, well, this is the information that we need to include in this illustration. It was a really amazing experience to be able to work on something so wide. It was also quite hard to get your head around, because I've conditioned myself to work in one particular small rectangle. So it was great. It was really good fun. But the sort of the inspiration, it always does come from what that text sort of suggests to you, the roots of that text and the inspirations behind that text. So really the main challenge with anything like that is getting it to work, nuts and bolts, getting it to work, getting it to look aesthetically pleasing, but also to be have the correct information in, but also to be sort of magical. And that's the indefinable thing. It's the magical bit that takes the work. That takes kind of drawing and redrawing until it just feels right.
And there are many more treats for the eyes among your illustrations. There's a couple of very striking pages, double-page spreads, with luminous detail drawings reversed out against a black ground. It's a bit like entering another dimension.
Entering another dimension, yeah. I think a sort of more kind of symbol-based dimension, maybe. Yeah, I think that's also an interesting thing, because you look back at art history and it's not always naturalistic. There's another side to it, which is how things appear to you as symbols. It feels like that's how you imagine, well, certainly how I imagine things. I imagine things in symbols. I don't, you dream in kind of movies, don't you? But certainly when you're trying to logically make an argument, I sort of feel like that makes a lot of sense. It sort of bridges the gap between your kind of dreamlike state and the ability to rationalize and be logical about stuff. So yeah, it kind of is like another dimension. Yeah.
The idea of magic, or representing magic through illustration, is something already familiar to you through your book, The Django, which you wrote and illustrated. But what is it about magic that appeals to you as an illustrator?
I do love the idea of magic. And I think what the idea of magic is to me is kind of mystery. Personally, that's what appeals to me. It's a mystery to how it works. Magic is something that you love when you're a kid and you love growing up. It's this idea that you can do anything that you want. And what's so interesting about Harry Potter, I guess, is that the magic systems are formalized and everyone's learning magic at school. It's something that you can study, and that's what's so fascinating about it. And I think it's not this sort of wild, untamed thing that is a mystery and everything. It's something that you can study, but it also makes miraculous things happen. I suppose throughout history, it's been something that has been taken very seriously. And at times, it's been the ultimate explanation for things. And you look at myths, and you look at legends, and you look at when you don't have a scientific explanation for something, you kind of create a metaphor for that thing happening. And I think that's quite an interesting way of looking at the world. It's great for kids to sort of invite them into a magical world and say all of these things can be possible, all of these dreams can be possible. And what's interesting about Harry Potter is that all these dreams can be possible if you study and if you work hard. And I think that's a really important distinction to make. And I think that really appeals to me about Harry Potter in particular.
I think there's a message there for all the children out there. Whatever it is, study. Your illustrations vary in their style and I guess their genre too. Some have this sort of charming old world character, a little bit gothic perhaps, very detailed line drawings, and sometimes this tonally restricted palette. Who have you looked to for inspiration in coming to your Harry Potter style, if I can call it that? What artists, what mediums inspire you to illustrate in the way you do?
Well, I think it's been a long time coming, really. I think it's one of those things where certainly, I remember growing up, I remember the Alan Lee illustrations from Lord of the Rings were extremely impactful to me. And I always remember reading heaps and heaps of fantasy when I was a kid, and all of the book covers when I was growing up were a bit more pictorial. But I think certainly those American paperbacks with artists like Michael Whalen and all of that kind of stuff, they all really appealed to me growing up. And John Howe, all of the people that were involved in all of the stuff that I loved growing up. When I was 9 or 10 and I was reading some of these. As it happens, I was exactly the right age to read Harry Potter, and so naturally I missed it, completely and utterly missed it until I was 16, 17. So there you go. It just happens like that. But certainly the fantasy illustrators, Brian Froud, kind of discovering those when you're a kid, or not necessarily discovering them, but then just being around in your house. I was really into comics as well growing up. Any comics artist. I was really into Steve Ditko and Jack Kirby and all of the greats. We had a whole bunch of comics hanging around. So all of that stuff sort of opens up your eyes to. And if you're sensitive to this stuff, I think it opens up your eyes to all this stuff, and then you sort of start getting interested in art. And so, growing up, I start getting interested in Breuil paintings and Albrecht Dürer. And his etchings were very, very informative to my Harry Potter work because, all of this stuff, all of Harry Potter is kind of draws on these historical influences, and they kind of mirror my interests really. And so kind of feels natural for me to be interested in this, and I think anyone can kind of spot that. But I'm very lucky to be able to mine those childhood influences and keep going with it. I think looking at this particular project, I think you go back to those. I went back to those medieval artists quite a bit, and looking at old books of hours where an anonymous monk was in charge of scribbling in the margins, and you get all sorts of fantastical creations there. I think that was certainly great sort of inspiration for this.
Levi, it's been a pleasure talking pictures with you. Thank you for joining me on the Good Reading Podcast.
Thanks so much for having me. Most appreciated.
I've been talking to Levi Pinfold about the Harry Potter Wizarding Almanac, the official magical companion to J.K. Rowling's Harry Potter books. It's published by Bloomsbury, and you can find it at goodreadingmagazine.com.au. My name is Greg Dobbs, and thanks for listening. This Good Reading Podcast was brought to you by Book People Gift Cards. Share the joy of reading with a Book People gift card. To find out more, visit bookpeoplegiftcards.org.au.